did a very, very bad thing. To whom, sir? To whom? Yes, sir. Well, I don't know.
My name is Paul Conroy. I'm an American citizen from Hastings, Michigan. I'm a civilian truck driver for Creston, Roland, and Thomas. And I've been taken hostage somewhere in Iraq.
You realize what you've done to my wife?
They still have that. Yeah.
He's a good shot. Always
irrefutable
was.
Proof that Gregory Peck was the second gunman that day in Dallas.
That's
that
right.
America lost its
Probably
innocence.
so.
I'm Mark.
I'm Tom.
And we are the Cinemaniacs. So we actually have a lot to talk about this
We
week.
do. It's kind of a. It's not a super busy day, so we don't have to rush through as is
Right.
our usual want. But only one in the theater.
Yes.
So we thank everybody at Keene Cinemas. But then like 4 or 5 at video headquarters. So we can get to it. I would like you to do it if you would.
Oh, sure. Thank you. So what do you do? What do you do? What do you do?
I know what I'd do.
What would you do? Well, let's look, but we're focusing on our friends
This is
in
true.
the home. What do you do when evil threats seek to destroy your galaxy and spatial area? Well, if you're... It's a good thing the camera's on me. If you know what's good for you, you call... Who are you going to call? You call the Guardians of the Galaxy.
So I'm not sure what this did at the box office. I'm assuming it was probably number 1.
Like 95 million.
Did it really?
Like
Okay. Because at the beginning of the summer, we're going through our list, and I was on one of the other radio stations, and for some reason picked this as being the big box office winner of the summer, even though it's coming in late. So I figured it would do pretty well. You know that I've always been into comic books. I worked for the other company.
The non-Marvel company?
Not the non-Marvel company. But grew up with Marvel. But there's so many lines out there. So I don't know a whole lot, didn't know really anything about Guardians of the Galaxy. We've seen the trailer ad infinitum and ad nauseum, certainly, as I'm sure is probably for you. So I went in kind of having real high hopes for this. I was a little disappointed.
Really?
Not terribly, but a little disappointed. I found it... I hate to say this, and maybe this is just my aging brain, but a little confusing at the beginning. I didn't...
Story-wise, after a while, I was like, I stopped paying attention.
We know
to
who the
the
bad
story.
guys are, but there are
Yeah.
echelons of the bad guys. There's certainly echelons of the good guys, so I found that a little confusing. Definitely want to see it again. My older son didn't get a chance to see it, so we'll go back and see it. And I think I'm probably going to like it even more, knowing a little bit more. I'm sure fans of the comic will probably love this. I thought the effects were terrific. I thought performances were terrific. And overall, it felt maybe a little bit long. But I think I was really expecting a lot from this. Ultimately, I left feeling that was probably one of the most fun movies I've seen in a long time. A lot of fun music. I was always hoping for more, always hoping for some new stuff. Some occasionally touching bits.
Surprisingly.
Surprisingly touching bits. So overall, I thought Guardians of the Galaxy is one of my favorite films of the summer.
I must echo your sentiments completely, minus the part about being disappointed.
Okay.
I went in with low expectations because the initial trailers didn't show you much. It basically set up who this Peter Quill, Chris Pratt, which kills me because my cousin's name is Chris Pratt, not the same guy. His character, Star-Lord, this cocky kind of adventurous guy. Most of the early trailers sell that, and that he's with these other people, and that there's a talking raccoon in it. So I didn't go in with much of an expectation, didn't know anything about the comic book, didn't know that it existed until the movie was made on it, which may have been smart on their part. I mean, Hollywood is all about, I always say, it's slide rules and pie charts as to what gets made. It's not necessarily about making a good movie, it's about making a movie with the right elements that make money. So taking a property that damn near nobody knows about, even comic book fans, is a risk, but at the same time, you're not alienating comic book fans who are saying, oh, you didn't do it right. There are fewer people who are going to quibble with the interpretation of the comic in this movie. I thought it was the most fun I've had with a Marvel movie since the Avengers. I thought it was a blast. Almost from the get-go. It starts off fairly serious, and I was surprised at the tone it begins with.
Right.
But then the moment you see this Star-Lord character in the present day, within moments, I was laughing out loud at his actions. I agree that I love the soundtrack. That trailer, the two trailers used, they used "Hooked on a Feeling" and they used "Spirit in the Sky," which actually isn't in the final film.
Yeah, "Spirit in the Sky" is not in the film.
It's 60s, 70s, 80s pop hits throughout the film, used in a great way. The action is really well done. There's a scene where Star-Lord is fighting the I can't think of her name.
Is it Thanos? Oh, right.
Sorry, I hate to be stupid. The Zoe Saldana character. They're actually laying side by side on the pavement, and they're doing what you normally would be doing in a fight standing up, but they're doing it on the ground. And it was just creative, and I hadn't seen that in a movie before. I thought it might be forced to have a talking raccoon with a bad attitude, but that totally works.
Yeah.
There's tenderness for all the characters. There's tenderness for the raccoon. There's tenderness with the walking tree that can only say, I am Groot. I mean, Vin Diesel, I'm thinking, who voices Groot, he must have put in like 15 minutes of work on this movie. He just shows up and they give us 10 readings of the word I am Groot. And, okay, then, thanks, here's your check. I just thought it was a blast. I think this is definitely one to see on the big screen because it's not in a bad way. It's visually dense. There's so much. The effects are so good, and the worlds and landscapes they create are so dense. You want to be able to just soak it all up on the big screen.
Right.
I think this is one that I do want to see again, just because it was so much fun. I want to have that experience again as big as possible.
Right.
I chose to see it in 3D, and the 3D was actually quite good. And this is a post-converted 3D, so this was not shot in 3D, which kind of surprised me because, again, the 3D was so good that I noticed it and it added a lot of depth to things. It enhanced my experience, which to me is what it should do. So I had a great time. I don't know about this for young kids. There's nothing overtly gruesome or crude. There's some very crude jokes in this, but I was surprised how delicately they were conveyed.
Yes, yeah.
There's a reference to Jackson Pollock that made me laugh out loud, and I was like, wow, they just said that. And at the same time, under a certain age, nobody's going to get that.
Right.
And there actually is a moment where a character almost says the F word, but they have him intentionally not say it, and I'm like, wow, restraint is nice, because the tone that the trailers give you for this movie, and that this movie has overall, is that this could have easily been a heavy PG-13, if not an R-rated film, if they chose to go in that direction, but they didn't. And it's a testament to what you can do with restraint in a movie. You can insinuate a lot without going there, that I wish more comedies would do these days, because too many comedies go there and then they go beyond, and then they almost literally rub your nose in it.
Right.
And this doesn't do that.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to see some smart filmmaking.
Yeah.
These people are all in control.
And it was interesting to see Karen Gillan, who fans of TV's Doctor Who may know as Amy Pond in the films, completely unrecognizable in this movie as a sort of minion of the evil villain in this film. She's completely in blue. She has an American accent, and I saw her name in the credits, and I kept wondering, when is she going to show up? And then through the process of elimination, I'm like, oh, it must be her. And she shows up in another film. So it was the unknowing Karen Gillan double feature we had this weekend. It was kind of cool. But yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy, I can't wait for another one. They've already announced part 2. They set it up for further adventures, which I think would be great. Really, really a tremendous amount of fun. I liked it a lot.
I'll agree completely. So we thank our friends at Keene Cinemas for that.
A lot.
About the only thing that opened, because who'd want to go up against this and try to make some money? I don't think so. But so moving on then to our videos, and we thank our friends at Video Headquarters, everybody over there, Brantley and everybody who might be there. But you thought society today was kind of fractured and set into different areas. Well, in the near future, it's a very dystopic society that has branched off into 5 different groups based on your skill set. And as you mature, you have to decide where you want to go. And if you don't want to go where they want to put you, then you're going to be called Divergent.
For those of you who've never seen The Hunger Games.
Yeah, it seems familiar, I would think. I don't know.
It's not the same thing as The Hunger Games, but boy howdy is it similar in tone.
Right.
I have a beef with these movies. The studios are trying to find the next Harry Potter, and they're trying to find... Hunger Games isn't done yet, but they're already trying to set up another Hunger Games. So you get all these movies that are vaguely similar in broad strokes. If you squint, they're more or less the same thing. And Shailene Woodley, who I thought was quite good in The Fault in Our Stars, this was her previous release was this, and it's yet another tale of the chosen one who's better than everybody or is magical, and she has a destiny, and she's going to bust the system that oppresses people and yawn, frankly.
Right.
You want to call it a Hunger Games knockoff. The defense is that this is based on a best-selling series of children's books, but aren't they all? And then we have one we were talking about off air coming up called The Maze Runner that is, again, transparently the same thing again, even if the source material was unique. So this was not a movie for me. It looked okay, but I was just tired. I didn't have a lot of patience for it.
Okay.
It's the whole Hunger Gamesy kind of thing. I didn't think Woodley was terribly strong as the lead in this. Who I can't recall her. I actually didn't rewatch this for the show. Sorry, I was busy this weekend. It's not in the theater. I'm going on memory. I recall her name even being vaguely similar to Katniss.
Right.
It was like Beatrice, and they call her Triss, and it's even that
Yeah.
close. And it's which pretty boy is she going to wind up with of the two people who are vying for her affections and all that stuff. And there's a moment where basically society is divided, I believe, into three groups. You know, one is the people who are the warriors, and the other is the people who are sort of caregivers, and I think another is maybe servants or something like that. Passionate teenage fans of these books, movies at CheshireTV.org if you want to correct us on that. But when the warrior group shows up for this big, trial or selection process, they're all jumping off a moving train going, whoop, whoop, whoop. It's vaguely reminiscent of the SWAT team at the end of Blues Brothers, all going hut, 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 hut. And I just started laughing in the theater because I can just see what Riff Tracks is going to do with this movie when they get their hands on it, which probably will be within a few weeks, I would imagine. So yeah, I thought Divergent was not for me. It's really for teenage kids, probably more for teenage preteen girls. There's already plans for a second entitled Insurgent, and probably a third called Regurgent, which will be my name for it. So they of course, the ending is very open-ended, leading off to the second film. And my memory of this is that it almost feels like the ending of the previous Hunger Games movie, if I recall, where they're on a train headed to fight the power and bust up the system. So take that for what you will. That's my thoughts on it.
You quite clearly can't avoid the comparisons to the Hunger Games. This is a real watered-down version. Not that makes it, that the fact that it's a copy and it's watered down makes it bad, but the performers, the actors, who I thought are okay, just don't have anything to do. This doesn't have the bite that the Hunger Games have. I never read any of the books, either Hunger Games or these, but I've grown to respect the Hunger Games for having a bite to it. I mean, they're not afraid to. I mean, they have these kids out there killing each other and here we're now just reviewing the Hunger Games and saying go to watch that. Right. I'm not crazy about those, but at least it has a bit more of a. And you talk about the Harry Potters. As Harry Potter, the franchise got older and kept going, it got a little bit more dark. It got more adult. And that's what I'm liking about it. So I'll give Divergent and its sequels, its quite clear sequels coming up, a chance, certainly. I thought performances were okay, but they didn't have a whole lot to do. It's so quite clearly a copy of the Hunger Games. And if you haven't seen the Hunger Games, I think maybe you'll like this. But other than that, unless you're a big fan of Rundown Chicago, I don't see a whole lot of reason to be watching Divergent. Sorry.
Not for grown-ups. So, speaking of reasons not to watch things, up next, what do you do when, or what do you feel when you're on the run from the law in a hot rod, souped-up, high-octane, mean machine? Well, you pop the clutch and tell the world to eat your dust if you have a need for speed.
Boy, it just looks like action, action, action.
Doesn't it now?
And this was one of the most boring movies I've seen in ages. I remember in the theater, and as is our wont, you and I were talking off air while this was going on, that I think we both seem to recall this being available in 3D. And I distinctly remember when I was watching it in the theaters that either it was available in 3D and they never had, it seemed to me this is the perfect movie to be in 3D and have POV shots where you're driving these cars, and they certainly never had the POV shots, which leads me to think that maybe this wasn't in 3D. Even if it was just a wasted opportunity. The whole setup is stupid because you have these two characters, Vega and Cooper, and they're in a race, and Cooper gets framed for the death of somebody. Well, if anybody would have bothered to even research, look into the accident, none of that would have happened. So the whole premise of the film is stupid.
They're racing these amazingly
Yeah.
exotic, brightly colored not even Formula One, exotic racing cars on a city street in broad daylight, and nobody sees what happens.
Nobody
There's
happens
no
to
cars
notice
around.
it. Right, yeah. So it's just silly. Michael Keaton is sort of fun, but I think it's probably just because it's Michael Keaton.
It's Michael Keaton as Cleavon Little in Vanishing Point. Pretty
Right, so he's on the internet, he's telling everybody, oh, this big race is going to happen, and blah, blah, blah.
This big underground race, and here's where it is.
Yeah, and here's where it is. Yeah, so the whole thing is just silly, silly, silly. It ends in a silly moment where this race over thousands of miles ends up in a peninsula where there's no place to go, and the police are right there. The whole thing just seemed like an unbelievable. Now, quite clearly, you're not going to go to one of these movies, any big fast car movie, Cannonball Run, whatever, for believability. But there's a level at which I have to say, come on. And all of the reasons that they purport to get these fast cars going and get these people going where they are just so silly that it just went out the door. And I went in looking forward to just a fun car movie, and this just got sillier and sillier. So can't recommend this either.
This movie made me really angry when I saw it in the theater.
That's too bad.
I love car movies, and if you want to hear, here's the little plug, sorry. If you want to hear me expunge upon car movies for about an hour and a half, thefilmbasement.com. My friends and I do a podcast, and we did one about car movies. But we recorded it before this, so I couldn't complain about this movie. So anyway, so I like car movies. I like the classic, in my mind, classic car movies are basically 70s, early 80s, Hal Needham, Burt Reynolds, drive-in car movies. When they shot it so you could see what was going on. Call me nuts. So this movie sets up, and I think they tried to push that this was practical. They did real stuff with real cars.
Right.
But again, it's badly shot, shaky. Half the time a car's doing something exciting and you have a extreme close-up of the driver's face, or you're looking through the windshield. And if a car's doing a corkscrew in midair, what the driver sees is not the most exciting thing. Seeing the car from a distance corkscrewing is probably pretty impressive because you don't normally see that in real life. So they totally threw the action away. And when if you take an action movie, if you remove the action from an action movie, what do you have left? You have a lame storyline, a bunch of doofus characters. It is so clearly ripping off or paying homage to the good car movies like Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, Vanishing Point, Eat My Dust, or Grand Theft Auto, stuff like that, all of which are infinitely better and rentable than this was. And the moment you see the character whose death sets the plot in motion, the moment he shows up on screen, I was like, well, he's going to die and cause this whole movie to happen. And shockingly, I was correct.
Right.
So yeah, it's based on a video game, and I'm sure part of the stylistic choices were to emulate what you see in the game, where you see like a computer readout on your windshield and looking through the windshield and all that stuff. But I don't want to look at a windshield in a car movie. You know what I mean?
Your discussion, a couple of things you said reminded me also, there are scenes where the police, it's obviously the police against our drivers, and you got to stop the drivers. So the police set up deadly roadblocks, things that are going to kill these people, and it's just so unbelievable.
It's ridiculous. At one point they're driving through a forest in California,
right,
and a police car is set up right on the edge of the road behind some trees, and they basically jam a brick on the gas pedal and decide to fire the car out at these drivers, hoping to hit the one they're looking for, and maybe kill people and just sacrifice a police car for this. And it also is a little Benny Hill-esque in a sense that as the movie goes on, more and more groups of people are after our hero.
Right.
So maybe if you just throw yakety sax over that and speed it up, it's better. But I really thought this was just a hunk of garbage.
Can't be worse.
Speaking of next,
whether it's better or worse, we're going to take a trip back to the 80s. In the mid-80s, sort of my era, but you're a young kid, you're feeling alienated. What's it like to be a teenager? Nobody likes you, but you happen to have a real preponderance and a real liking for a certain kind of pretty action kind of music, and you're into table tennis. So to spend your time properly, you're going to have a ping pong summer. Oh,
sorry,
we're back.
You caught us unawares.
Yes.
So
they sneak up on us.
We
like
both
that.
lived through the era. This film was. We were both having fun in '85. So one of the things when it's a film about the past that I lived through, I get the critical eye. And I'm like, okay, where are the inaccuracies and all that? It's usually the hairstyles. Usually people are afraid to commit to a correct hairstyle.
Clothing goes too far.
Yeah. But this was actually pretty accurate as far as, I spent a couple weeks in York Beach, Maine in 1984, and that's a very similar vibe to the area this took place in. I thought this was really boring and not funny. It was very. At first, I'm like, is this trying to be Napoleon Dynamite, where it's like aggressively weird and not funny, and all the performances are really awkward and stilted and non-actory? And then I didn't find it funny. I mean, I hate to repeat myself any more than I normally do, but I was bored. I didn't care about this kid who was like I say a zombie, not in the flesh-eating sense, but in the jungle drums being controlled by somebody else kind of sense. He was just vacant and just walking around slack-jawed. And he had this sidekick who was, again, was he trying to overact badly so that it was supposed to be funny?
Right.
I just didn't like it. The music was interesting for the most part, but
nothing super memorable.
I almost shut it off like 20 minutes in because it was just so boring to me. So I wouldn't recommend, and it seemed a lot like this movie, The Way, Way Back, that came out recently, which was a better made movie, but I also didn't really care for it. That had Steve Carell, and it was about, a young awkward kid on the seaside during a summer looking for romance and life.
What a surprise.
But that was better than this was. This was just not good.
One of the things you need in any decent narrative film, something with a story, is, I think for the audience to become invested in it, is you have to have a motivated character. So a character who's willing to be proactive and go out and do something. And I think the goal that the character is seeking needs to be worthwhile. And I thought this was very mundane. We've all been through it. And so maybe that's kind of the point, the writers are trying to connect. We've all gone through these kinds of things, but there wasn't enough there for me. The performances, as you say, are really weak, with the exception of Susan Sarandon.
Who was great.
Who was pretty much always good, even in Tammy, I suppose, the pretty bad Melissa McCarthy film most recently. So she's always good, and she brought a decent vibe to it. But yeah, this is so reminiscent of several other films. It reminds me of Adventureland, and like you said, I mean, we'll harp back to Guardians of the Galaxy, even though it's not set in that era. It's drawing upon the similar era and the music of that time. It's clear this film is clearly aimed at the people who grew up and lived through that era. So, give us more memorable moments. Refer to more memorable incidents, and bring some decent songs together. I didn't think there was really anything that I could recommend about this because it was so. Ultimately, my comment for this one is mundane.
Yeah.
So not too crazy about that.
No. Speaking of wrestling, the WWE returns to the cinematic arena, the cinematic squared circle, if you will, with...
and what's with them? Wow.
I don't know, but I hope they keep doing it.
Yeah, keep going.
The WWE presents this next film about a brother and a sister who suffered bizarre, perhaps supernatural trauma as youths, who tried to come to terms as adults with this and fight the evil that may or may not lurk within an ancient mirror in Oculus.
Creepy stuff, kids.
You get scared all over again.
This one starts really, really slowly. It's like half an hour before it gets going. But I have some issues with the ending of this. You know perfectly well, I love paranormal movies. I used to be an investigator with the TAPS teams and things like that. So I love this stuff. I'm familiar with all of it. So we follow this this brother and sister duo, which, as you said in the introduction, suffer some terrible calamity. Something scary happens and their parents are killed. And they suspect this strange mirror that as they grow up, the brother ends up needing psychiatric care, and the sister is out moving on. She becomes an art historian and collector and works at like a Sotheby's, and actually is able to get a hold of this thing. Strangely enough, coincidentally enough, as soon as the brother gets out of the mental hospital, they have this. So they take this thing back, and it's all about them trying to essentially entice whatever may or may not be in the mirror out. So they're setting up all these things, and as you and I were saying again off air, it cuts back and forth between, like half of it is flashback, and normally I'd say, oh, the F word, that's horrible, flashback, don't say it. But it really works very well. I thought the middle hour of this film was as gripping and intense and evocative as any horror film I've seen in a long time. Now, I have a little bit of personal issues with the way it ends. I'm not going to talk about that. But boy, overall, Oculus, which was not around here in the theaters, and I always wanted to see it, I thought it was really, really solid.
I think this is one of the better horror movies I've seen in a while. And I watch a lot, and I don't like a lot of what I see. And again, we were saying before we started, WWE Films has
What's with
become a
them?
company to watch.
Wow, yeah.
Because you expect initially that it's going to be movies like No Holds Barred, and it's going to be they're going to force a wrestler in them. It's got nothing to do with wrestling. There's no wrestler in this film.
Yeah.
And again, it stars Karen Gillan from Doctor Who, and it's interesting to see her with an American accent because you're so used to seeing her with Scottish accent for people who watch the show, and she's so good at doing the full American accent that you would never know if you didn't know. And she's very good as the lead in this. And I love how it goes back and forth, and you really kind of don't know if it's something supernatural or if it's a psychological problem one or more people have in this story, because they sort of do through these flashbacks. They posit certain events as being both ways. They show you alternates, and it's not until a ways in the film that it becomes pretty clear where it's going. And it was creepy without being overtly. It's not a lot of jump scares, which I always think is a cheat. It's a great sense of dread and tone that wafts through this. It's very well shot. It's not the crap that makes me annoyed. It was stable and well composed and really well edited. The shifting between the past and the present is creatively done. It's not just they talk about something and you're in the past. It's almost it's hard to explain without giving anything away. But I was really impressed, and when I stopped it, I kind of said out loud to myself, because I'm only slightly crazy, that was really good. I need to tell friends to go see this, because most people would think, I've never heard of this movie, WWE, it's going to be garbage, and it really wasn't. This was really a good one to watch, and it's not. I'm trying to remember. It's not horrendously gory.
No.
There is some serious violence here and there, but most of it really is tone and subject matter more than anything else.
Right.
So I would really pretty highly recommend Oculus as a good turn out the lights creepy rental.
Yeah, I would too. Performances are like half and half. Strangely enough, the men are not very solid.
I agree.
Just kind of unknowns. Karen Gillan, who plays the lead character, is really quite solid. Battlestar Galactica fans will enjoy seeing Katie Sackhoff, as her mom, who in sometimes is a little bit wasted, just kind of not really reactive, but I think intentionally so, because it builds up to some really emotional, startling, scary reactions from her. So the women really take this film over, I think, but I'll agree completely that this was a big surprise for me, and I was really happy to take a look at Oculus. I thought it worked pretty well.
Absolutely. Speaking of haunted mirror movies.
Haunted mirror movies, you need to look in the mirror and ask yourself how much you believe. Do you believe in God? Well, we have one freshman who is entering into, strangely enough, college, and he's a firm believer. But watch out, if you get into Professor Kevin Zorbo's theology class, isn't everybody taking a theology class from Professor Zorbo? Professor Zorbo just can't handle God, doesn't exist, really thinks that there's no reason for it. And Professor Zorbo challenges this young, naive Christian believer to prove that God's not dead. So this one, okay, what I will give this, it's got great production value. It's very well shot and everything. It looks okay. And Kevin Sorbo is not that bad. But
no, he's okay.
He's an okay actor, which kind of surprises me.
He's one of the better actors in the movie.
In the movie, probably. But this one is so, and to use your term, I'm going to steal it, but it's so obviously preaching to the choir. I can't imagine this is very much, and there's no surprise here, very much pro-Christian, pro-faith, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. We've seen several films like that recently. Some do it better than others. This one was just so in your face, and the people who don't believe are such villains and so awful to everybody, and the people who do believe are, they're walking around and they green screen the halos out so you can't see those. It's just really so obvious what this film has to say, and it's so in your face that I just really didn't care much for God's Not Dead. Sorry.
I can only add to what you have said.
Okay.
Would you, as a professional college professorial type, ever single out a student and just ridicule them in your class and tell them to teach your class for you for a semester if they said, I think flashbacks are important? Would you would you single them out and change the whole syllabus for your semester to make a fool out of that person?
For this movie,
because that's what happens in this movie, and I'm like, seriously, it is so. People who make fun of religious, faith-based, let's say, entertainment is due to movies like this.
Right.
Because we had Heaven is for Real a week or so ago, which you can also rent. And I was saying before that came out of the clip, they're both essentially doing the same thing, and there's a right way and a wrong way if you want to appeal to anybody other than the converted, and Heaven is for Real is the right way to do it.
Right.
This is just, you're an idiot if you're not a believer, and if you're a believer, you're righteous and you're being oppressed, and we won't get into how much oppression your side has done over the years, but that's okay because you're
Right.
oppressed. If
There you
somebody
go.
says, maybe there's another way, and there's this movie shows that faith will save the heathen Muslim from their horrendous family situation to bring them to a concert where they can all text somebody at the same time.
Right.
And it was awful. And I have nothing against people who believe whatever they want to believe, but when it is so aggressively, you're an idiot if you don't agree with us, it bugs me.
Right.
This could have been a film about atheism, and I would feel the exact same way. Any kind of strong push in one direction, it's like, hey, can't we all be friends? So and it was really cheesy.
Yes.
And most of the acting is not very good. And the ultimate fate of Kevin Sorbo in this film
It's pretty laughable.
is actually kind of laughable. And again,
Yeah.
it's a moment where it's like, I can't wait until Riff Tracks gets a hold of this. So if you're a terribly religious person and you want your beliefs reinforced by a fair to middlingly made movie, then this is the film for you.
Right.
But I would recommend Heaven is for Real
Yeah.
over that, because that's so much better made on every level, and it actually encourages discussion with this, which this really doesn't. And this also tries to use a lot of false information in science to reinforce its opinions.
Absolutely.
And misquotes of things.
Very selective misquotes of science, yes.
So yeah, this is, I think when we reviewed this in the theater, you had said this is really a propaganda piece. So there's an audience for it. I hope they enjoy it. But if you're the kind of person who is not into that sort of thing, or maybe it's the kind of person who likes to laugh at this sort of thing, this movie is or is not for you.
One of those two. So it either is or isn't.
All complaints go to him at movies@CheshireTV.org.
Thanks so much.
So that's all we had
Yep.
for video this week.
Yep.
And in the theater, so not too bad.
I had an opportunity to, as long as we're trashing stuff,
We have time.
to watch the sequel to a film that very intentionally cheesy, intentionally just really funny. I loved Sharknado, so I was really looking forward to Sharknado 2, the second one. Lightning strikes once, I think.
Really?
I just thought it was really, they tried so hard to be. And again, one of the things that I liked about Sharknado, it's in many respects the same way that Airplane works, is you have a really silly concept and you play it straight. And for some reason, I thought the first one worked. Second one, for me, just fell flat on its face.
We have time. Why not? We're going to review Sharknado movies. I liked the first one a lot, because the concept is not, in theory, is not totally ridiculous. The idea behind Sharknado was that coastal flooding on the California coast brings the tide waters very far inland. So with the water comes the fishies that are inside that.
Right.
So a lot of it is people trying to get through flooded city streets to safety, and there are sharks swimming around in the water, and that's actually kind of cool around your cars and stuff. The silly part of it is that these tornadoes or water spouts suck sharks up out of the water, and they just start flinging them out at people. So it's sharks flying out of the sky.
Right directly at people's heads,
And
strangely enough.
People poo-poo the Sci-Fi Channel movies. They're not supposed to be taken seriously.
Right.
I mean, they're all done with a wink. Some are done with a waka waka, and some are done with a straight face. And I enjoy them overall. They all more or less, I would say at least 80% of them use the same script, which is the script for Jaws, where some big event is going on and something is threatening and killing people in the periphery, and somebody realizes this and says, you got to call off the barn dance. And there's the mayor's like, this is barn dance is our moneymaker for the year. Somebody could shoot one of these at Pumpkin Festival, actually. And they're like, no, you can't call it off. And then people getting killed, and then usually that person gets stomped on. And there's always a celebrity cameo, and they get snatched. They're usually there for like 30 seconds, and they say something, or they're outraged, and something goes whoosh, and takes them away. Apparently, Conan O'Brien just is in the one that premieres this week, which was Sharktopus versus Terracuda.
Terracuda, right.
Coming up is Sharktopus versus Mermantula.
There's the
which
whole
I'm
mess
looking
of
forward
them.
to.
And there's several people get snatched toward the beginning of Sharknado.
Do they?
Too. And there are some funny little inside jokes. The pilot who is flying the plane, it's pretty funny. And there are a couple of passengers who get snatched. So that's sort of amusing. But once it gets going, I just found it to be too repetitive. I don't know what I was hoping for more.
Right.
But you're absolutely right that the Sci-Fi Channel folks, they're not trying to make a good movie or anything. But this one, just unfortunately, maybe it's almost the opposite of Guardians of the Galaxy. I was hoping for so much for it to be back to the same thing that I was expecting too much of it. I don't know.
It's funny how much it's being hyped, because it's just it caught on, you know.
One really strange thing, and if anybody's if the Sci-Fi Channel is watching, I know you are. very strange that when we were watching it, they had all of these fake tweets and text and stuff like that come up at the top that were really distracting, and all it was text all your friends of how great Sharknado 2 is. And it was really, really distracting.
I find the whole Twitterization of TV
Yeah.
really desperate and forced. Like the whole putting the hashtags on the screen, it's like,
Right.
make sure you talk about this. And I'm like, if you make a quality product, people are going to talk about it.
Yeah, we're going to talk
Get
about
the crap
it.
off my screen.
Let me watch it.
You know, I'll talk about how much I don't watch your channel anymore because you put crap all over the screen.
Right.
I've got a recording of Sharknado that I have made, Sharknado 2,
Okay.
That I haven't watched yet, so I look forward to
We'll see if it has that or
experiencing
not.
that this week.
Right.
My extracurricular viewing over the weekend, which somehow I managed to squeeze in because we have time, I watched the Scream Factory Blu-ray of They Live, John Carpenter's
excellent.
1988
One of my favorites.
sci-fi movie, which is one of those where it's like the less you know about it, the more impact the twist has.
Right.
But try to find a copy of it that doesn't have the. I mean, the movie poster gives the twist away.
Yeah.
But it's Roddy Piper. Speaking of WWE, it all ties together. Plays down on his luck construction worker in a then slightly futuristic, but not really, L.A. And this movie gets more. It becomes truer the more time passes. This was made in the era of Bush 1, where the economy wasn't in great shape. So in this world, there are the haves and the have-nots, and there's a wide separation. And there's a lot of people who are working to survive, but they still live essentially in homeless camps. And by hook and by crook, Roddy Piper discovers why things are the way they are and attempts to change this. This is a movie that would appeal to the Occupy movement now more than it ever would. Every time I watch this, it becomes more relevant. And it's very funny, it's very kick-ass, badass.
Yeah.
It's a cross between an action movie and a sci-fi movie. If there's a way you can see it without looking at the box cover, maybe if you have Netflix or something, I know
Right.
Video Headquarters has it on video. If you just don't look at the box cover, take it home and watch it. And probably don't look at the menus either.
It's got a great Carpenter soundtrack.
His
It's
score.
got some of the greatest, funniest, intentionally funny lines.
One of the longest fight scenes
One
ever.
of the longest fight scene, which first time I saw it, I just thought this is the stupidest thing. The more I watched it, I got it, and it's just hilarious. So I just love They Live.
The co-star is Keith David, who most
Yep.
people know for voicing Ken Burns documentaries and things like that, and being in John Carpenter's The Thing, actually.
Yep.
So They Live is great. The Scream Factory has a nice Blu-ray out with tons of extras and a commentary with Carpenter and Piper, who's quite good in the movie, by the way.
Yeah.
You never would have thought that back then. I watched that, and then I watched A Hard Day's Night, the new
Really? Okay.
Criterion Blu-ray of A Hard Day's Night, which looks beautiful, has a lot of extras. It's basically all the extras that were on the previous incarnations have been all put into one package. And the music's great. You have your choice of the original mono or a 2.0 stereo or a 5.1 stereo.
Well, gee,
And
not a
because
big question.
I was watching it in bed late at night, the mono is a nice flat mix, which is nice. So not a lot of, live mix on your remote like you often have to do.
Okay.
And it's the Beatles' first feature film.
Right.
And it was based on a writer went on a brief tour with them in England and basically got how they all acted with each other and what their situation in life was, how they're basically prisoners of their fame and always running from throngs of fans. And he wrote this movie. And it's got like 6 or 8 or 12 Beatles songs that were written for the movie. The more or less the origin of the music video is from this film.
Sure.
They're all very good actors in the film. Who would have thought that these, working class musicians would be good actors? And it's a very tight, like 93 minutes. It's funny as hell, nicely shot, and it's a nice slice of that moment in time before they became the worldwide icons. We're like right on the edge of that.
Right.
So I would highly recommend A Hard Day's Night in any form.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
it's
the
great.
Blu-ray looks great, but VHS tape used to look good too. So that was my those are my tawdry 2 that I was able to.
We
squeeze
keep
in.
busy, don't we?
We try.
So
I got nothing else to talk about.
until next week,
I'm
movies
Mark.
at CheshireTV.org. Oh, see, I beat you to it. Sorry. And who are you again?
Oh, hi. I'm Mark.
And I'm Tom.
And we are the
Cinemaniacs.